Want to watch this episode? We're on YouTube. Just search Katie Prentiss or hit the link in the show notes. I'm Katie Prentiss, and this is Sunshine Soul. I remember flying out of Portland one gray morning. It had been raining for days. That kind of heavy, wet Pacific Northwest gray that just seeps into your bones. I had the window seat on the plane like always. And as we ascended, I watched the droplets race across the glass. The clouds outside were so thick, like walls. And for a moment, it felt like the sun just didn't even exist anymore. And then we broke through. Probably my favorite moment. The clouds fell away, and there it was. Blue sky, bright light, the sun just sitting there like it had been the whole time. And it hit me in that moment. The sun is always shining, even when we can't see it. Here at Sunshine Soul, we hope, we heal, and we love despite the clouds. We remember that there's light ahead. Welcome to Sunshine Soul. Let's keep looking for the light together. Episode 7, Hungry Ghosts. We've done 6 episodes so far, 6 episodes of me talking about what shaped my identity, so much loss and what I call unraveling. And I look back and I think there is so much that I've been through in this concentrated time. When I think about in 2016 losing my mom, and then 2018 my son, my first child, graduating from high school, and then also getting my first acting gig, to the pandemic in 2020 when my second child graduated from high school. It's been interesting for me as I'm sharing with you all to be able to also reflect and think, oh, it's a lot. It's a lot of identity shift. And it's interesting to me to think about how much of my identity growing up was really and truly shaped on my relationships. I think about being a middle child and how my experience growing up was often that I was the point person in my family. Like, I would be so close. I was close with my brother growing up, and we were each other's confidants. And I was also my sister's older, I was the big sister. And so I was asked to play and take care of my younger sister, who's 4 years younger. And I think about how I would interject and soothe my parents when they got in fights. I would be asked to go talk to siblings when things were upset or fragmented in our family. And then I moved into high school and college, where I was constantly thinking about others. How can I serve others? What can I give? How can I, create impact and change with who I'm around? Then I moved into marriage, where I thought about, how can I love my husband? How can I be interested in his interests? How can I, serve and give to him? And then I moved into mothering, where I had 1, then 2, then 3, then 4 children, where I wanted them to feel nurtured and cared for. I wanted them to know that I was someone who will always be there for them. I was someone who will be in the front row, cheering the loudest. I would be there when they fell, and I would be there to pick them back up and hold them. This was my journey. I was the support person. My identity truly revolved around others. And then, of course, ministry was just as much like that. Church, all of those years of giving to others, it was easy for me to say yes to so many people in my life. It was harder for me to say yes to myself. I would say no to myself. We would joke about me being the yes parent in our family. But learning to say yes to myself is a later in life, newer experience. And as I've shared, it's come with a lot of fear. I think that one of the things that highlights this journey so much for me is my stepping into acting. For the first time in my life, since I got married, really, I found I had something just for me. I found relationships and community in the acting world that had nothing to do with my husband or my children. It was so fascinating to have this new experience, to kind of almost have like a clean slate of walking into a room, into a new community and being whoever I was, even as I was exploring who I actually was. I want to go back to the time when I first started acting class, because I think it's interesting to observe how I entered into that world. I knew that acting was something I wanted to continue to do. And as I shared, I wanted to get the external validation on whether I was talented or not, which, I don't even like that phrasing anymore. I walk into the room. I was nervous beyond belief. I had no idea what to expect. I'm in this group of actors. I assume everybody knows everything. I assume I am the only one who doesn't know anything. That night, we were doing some Meisner exercises, which, if anyone's in the acting community, is a lot of repetition. You're literally staring at another person's face and repeating and noticing and staying present and being very aware of what is happening in this person in front of you and responding. And it's so fascinating even to say that and think that's how I lived my life, is noticing everyone else. And yet I left that night and I remember talking to my husband and I said, I have never been so sweaty and so nervous and scared in my whole life. Like I came home and I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I just did that. And then I would go back. And even in that entrance of this acting class with Scott Rogers, he would have us, he would say, like, please sign up to do a monologue and a scene. And I remember being in that class thinking, I don't want to sign up to do that. I was terrified. So even though I'm like paying and joining and wanting to learn and grow, I'm still in the back observing, staying small. This is how I lived my life. This was the way I stayed safe or protected in my mind. But eventually I got up there. I got on stage. I don't even remember what my first monologue was. I probably have blocked it out of my memory because I'm sure it wasn't amazing. But you know what? I got through it. And I did it. Acting for me became this thing that was, this is mine. This is all mine. This is it. This is what I'm going to lean into. And this is where I'm going to find my freedom, my individuality. And I want to explore that. I think that my journey with acting was a journey of allowing myself to belong fully as I was. And as I sat there in that class, holding back and observing and hesitating, I remember watching other new students join and just jumping in. And I would observe them and I think, wow, they really just walked into this class like they've been here for years. And I was so confused by that level of comfort. How did they do that? Had they already done this before? Like, I was super confused. And I realized so much of that is a choice. So much of that is how we feel that we get to exist in the world, period, in general. I was walking into this class assuming I didn't belong, assuming I needed to stay small and pulled back. But that was just a permission that I needed to give myself, that I can walk into that room and know I am allowed to belong there just as much as anyone else. It was a huge shift for me. There was also this shift of individuality and learning who I was for the first time. And I was reading this book a while back by Elizabeth Gilbert called Big Magic. And there's a section that I want to pull from for this episode, and it has to do with the ego. She talks about failing, and I think like exposing myself to acting and deciding that I wasn't going to get that external validation from the get-go, and having to go up on stage and be a sweaty hot mess doing a first monologue and knowing it might be total trash. It was allowing myself to fail, but it's also really incredibly uncomfortable, especially when you're doing something that you care about, that you want to be good at. And there's this whole wrestling that happens inside that she's describing with the failure, like how it stinks, how it sucks, how we get that mean voice of like, do better, work harder, like, oh, you're so dumb, or whatever we say to ourselves that's so hateful. She talks about that reaction, those feelings are our ego. And she says, I've got nothing against egos, broadly speaking. We all have one. Some of us might even have two. Just as you need your fear for basic human survival, you also need your ego to provide you with fundamental outlines of selfhood, to help you proclaim your individuality, define your desires, understand your preferences, and defend your borders. Your ego, simply put, is what makes you who you are. Without one, you're nothing but an amorphous blob. Therefore, as the sociologist and author Martha Beck says of the ego, don't leave home without it. And I read that and I think about how much of my life was spent suppressing that. The way I always understood ego was pride or, being inflated about ourselves, or they have a big ego, big head, It was all of those ideas of a negative character trait. But what I also is that self-ownership of knowing who I am as an individual, what my preferences are, what my needs are, what my boundaries are. These are all things that I had spent most of my life suppressing and denying. It's a lot of work to unpack those things. A lot of that was built upon these ideas that I learned in evangelicalism. It's that denial of self, distrusting of self. Ego is to be destroyed and confessed. Even the simple wanting or desiring more can often be like suppressed and denied. So I was shifting in ways that were uncomfortable, that were unknown to me. I was learning things about myself for the first time. I was realizing like, oh, I have preferences and tastes and I'm allowed to like things. I'm allowed to say no to this or that. I'm allowed to have boundaries, and it's actually so good to have these things. As I moved into acting, I feel like this exploration, I think there's this idea that often if you take a pendulum and you swing it, when things are imbalanced in our life, they might be swung to one way pretty extreme. And often when we're trying to correct that, we can swing to the other side too far before we can find some sort of balance in a pendulum swing. And I think that is an interesting thing for me to consider, because it's like I was opening up for the first time, but I also was like diving into this ego of like, I am putting my neck on the line. I am exposing myself in ways that I never have before on social media, in acting, in changing this career. I was sensing and even hearing judgment from external voices. It was almost like exposure therapy in a big way. So I also, while I was trying to be comfortable with that, I was also eager to prove people wrong. I was eager to prove myself and show that I can do this. There's this next section of this ego chapter, and the chapter is called Hungry Ghosts. And I love this phrase. It is so profound to me. Do not let your ego totally run the show, or it will shut down the show. Your ego is a wonderful servant, but it's a terrible master, because the only thing your ego ever wants is reward, reward, and more reward. And since there's never enough reward to satisfy, your ego will always be disappointed. Left unmanaged, that kind of disappointment will rot you from the inside out. An unchecked ego is what the Buddhists call a hungry ghost, forever famished, eternally howling with need and greed. Oh my goodness. Hungry ghost. So here I am entering into this industry that is constant rejection. I experienced some doors opening pretty early on. And I think because of my entrepreneur background and my self-determination, which is also a form of my ego, is I think I can figure this out. I can master this. I love that she says the ego is both a helpful guide and a dangerous master. Our ego can give us this hunger and this appetite and this determination in a really good way, but it also can create this bottomless pit of needing reward. There's that differentiation, and it's a keeping those things in check and being self-aware. So for me, going into this industry that is all about external validation and obsessed with external validation, it's the danger of trying to really base my worth on outcomes. So here's the thing. I get into this industry and I think, okay, well, what are the hoops that I need to jump through? What do I need to do? How fast can I get this done? I'm an entrepreneur. I know how to build a business. I can do this. So I get into class. I start auditioning for every role I can get. I think for this first year, my main goal is getting as much experience as possible. I'm willing to work for free. I'm willing to work on college student projects, whatever I could. They say you need headshots, resume, and reel when you're first starting acting. And so I'm like, headshots, easy. I'm a photographer. I can get that done, easy. I'm going to get in front of the camera now. Resume. Okay, well, you need work to book work. That is so common in every industry, right? They're like, we want to hire you, but you have to have experience. How do you get experience when you first need to get hired? It's true in film industry as well. I had my first booking with Sophie Jones, so at least I had that. I was in class. I was trying to build my resume. I was auditioning and booking whatever I could, working for free. And then reel is the footage of acting that you've done so far. It's wild because often you can, I booked Sophie Jones in 2018. I don't think I got the footage for that until maybe 2022. So that's a common thing where actors are able to book things, but they don't have anything to show for it. And then productions want to see that you can act and you don't have the footage. So it's an interesting thing. I came into this industry thinking I'm starting a race at 11th hour. Like, let's say the marathon started at 8 a.m. I'm starting at 12 noon. People are going. They're already crossing the finish line, and I'm just starting out. So I felt like I needed to work faster and harder than everybody, and I needed to prove myself. I also felt this sense of pride, also probably ego, of like, I've been able to do so much so quickly. So there is something to show. I believed in myself. I believed I could actually do this. I believed that I knew I wanted it. I knew my work ethic. I knew the way I work with people is a good thing. I'm like collaborative and bring good energy to set. And so for me, I thought, okay, I'll get an agent. I'll figure this out. I'll start booking bigger roles and more paid gigs. And I submitted to most of the reputable agents in Portland and got absolutely rejected. If I did hear back from people, it was, we already have too many of your type on my roster, or like, we can't, no, we're not interested. Or it was just most commonly radio silence. I remember being like kind of mad because there was just such a disconnect from how I knew the value I would bring to a roster and other people didn't see it. That can be a really frustrating thing. But it also lit a fire under me. I remember thinking, okay, tell me no again. Like, I'll show you. I felt like Julia Roberts and Pretty Woman, where she goes back to the shop that won't sell to her and she says, big mistake, huge. And I was going to enter into my acting career in that same way. I'm like, oh, you don't want me on your roster? Oh, that's going to be so sad for you down the road. But again, it was this, there was some of that was like a good fire. And I want to always retain that feisty fire that I have in me to have that self-determination. But there was also this hungry ghost that I felt rearing my head. I would find someone that I knew was a director or a filmmaker, and I would find myself like leaning in and trying to figure out like how can I build a relationship with you so that you can book me. It was like genuine, but I also knew like there was some sort of like just insatiable desire for my own success. And it's one of those things that I didn't like to see in myself. I didn't know how to acknowledge it, that it was even there. And I didn't know how to tamper it down. Like, how do you feed this thing that feels insatiable? I had booked so much at this point. I was working so hard. I was building my resume. I was getting real. I was having success, but it didn't feel like enough. I still felt like I needed to prove myself to people who I felt like were naysayers. I was paying attention to the wrong energy. And I think that some of that, I've heard of acting being called a road paved with no's. And I think it takes a rare type of individual who is like, yeah, I'm going to do that. I remember thinking I had been an entrepreneur for at least 14 years at this point in my life. And I felt like I knew how to achieve relative success in that. And acting, I felt the same way in some ways. I'm like, the parts that I could control, I was able to do. But there was so much of this industry that felt like purely playing the lottery. I would often say, like, we work as hard as any business owner, entrepreneur, brand, but yet we're also playing the lottery. Like, we're submitting for the gigs, and it can be such a toss-up sometimes, whether we even get in front of casting, much less actually book a role. I think that part of what helped me learn about my own hungry ghost desire was honestly seeing it in others. And I think that so often we learn about ourselves in relationship with other people. As I was getting to bigger career success, I would find that people who I saw as really close friends in this industry not be able to celebrate success. I found that people wanted to attach themselves to me when they felt like they had something to offer, that they felt like they, when I was down, it was easy for people to enter in and give support. But when I was up in finding my own success, I found that the room got really quiet, especially like people who I felt like there were a few people who felt like closer friends who, when I booked some of the biggest gigs I had, kind of all in a series, it got real quiet. Didn't even notice, didn't even say anything. No congratulations. And I thought, wow, feels really lonely achieving the success. I remember one of my friends reached out and said, hey, how's it going for you? Are you getting encouragement? I'm so proud of you. And I said, actually, it's been really quiet. And she's like, that's so hard. And I know how that feels. And it was such like a light bulb moment for me of, oh, wow, there are people that will not be able to celebrate with you. And that is their own hungry ghost rearing their head. Oh, and being a yes person and being a person who loves to support other people, I often say, like, I am a champion of pep talks. Like, I love to give people encouragement and pump them up. I've had to learn how to like be more careful and specific with that energy and make sure that it's able to be reciprocated here and there. there is the ability for us to celebrate the success for others. And that has been a huge way for me to quiet my own hungry ghosts. I find it to be really helpful to even like say little mantras. I often say things like, you can't compete with me because I want you to win. Or I say, there's room for all of us at the table. Or I say, we all rise together. I think repeating those things truly helps me because it's easy for all of us to like, an Instagram post pops up and we see someone what feels like experiencing ease or winning or like everything happens for them. Like we get these thoughts of comparison or competition or jealousy. And I think it's a really natural ego response for us to have is that first thing that we might say is, what about me? Like, why don't I have that? I want that. And the way that I find my own self being able to tamper that down is like I'm celebrating. I say things out loud even when I see these things in people's lives. It's like, congratulations, we all rise together. A win for you is a win for me. There's room for all of us at the table. I remember thinking in my photography business years ago when I first started out and I was incredibly insecure, I would watch other people's photography business and I would look at their style and look at the way they communicate and I would think I can be like them. And some of that is like learning from other people and that's okay. There's time and place for that. But it wasn't too long before I realized I'm actually better served when I just stay in my own lane and focus on my own work and figure out how I want to work with my clients, how I want to build my business, figure out my own style, my own vibe and ways of doing things. And when I did that and I stopped paying so much attention to people who were doing similar business to me, it became so much more easy and like grounded and I wasn't competing. I wasn't comparing anymore. And once I was in that lane like that for a while, I was able to just celebrate their work and my work and not feel like they needed to be each other's. I think that's the same with acting is like knowing that everyone has their own path and their own journey, that my journey in acting looks nothing like anybody else's, and that's okay. One thing doesn't qualify one or the over the other. Like we're all going to find our own way into what we're supposed to be doing. And there's this last section in this book and this chapter about hungry ghosts that I want to note. Some version of that hunger dwells within all of us. We all have that lunatic presence living deep within our guts that refuses to ever be satisfied with anything. Ouch, right? I have it, you have it, we all have it. My saving grace is this, though. I know that I am not only an ego, I am also a soul. And I know that my soul doesn't care a whit about reward or failure. My soul is not guided by dreams of praise or fears of criticism. My soul doesn't even have language for such nonsense. My soul, when I tend to it, is far more expansive and fascinating source of guidance than my ego will ever be, because my soul desires only one thing: wonder. And since creativity is my most efficient pathway to wonder, I take refuge there. And it feeds my soul and it quiets the hungry ghost, thereby saving me from the most dangerous aspect of myself. She says even like, my ego, there you are, old friend, after that. And I think this is the idea. The idea is that this is the work, is like noticing when your ego rears up, but also tending to our souls. My acting coach, Ben Mathis from Crash Acting, has this sentence or phrase that he often says. He talks about how the acting industry is transactional. But he says acting is transformational. And I think that when I hear that dichotomy, I think, wow, that is very much reflective of hungry ghost behavior versus soul nurturing. And when we think about the transactional nature of the industry, it can make all of us feel like hungry ghosts. We have scarcity, we have fears, we wonder when our next gig is. You can talk to the most successful actor that you can imagine, and I guarantee you, they wonder where their next gig will come from. Every time a movie wraps, they wonder if that's it. Is that it for me? Is my career dried up? Is that all? And when we think about the transformational work of acting, the nurturing of our soul, the creating of wonder, curiosity, empathy, that's where the magic lies. I think for me, that has been the most transformational part of all of this in my identity shifts is learning that I'm living my dream. One of my favorite quotes from Mark Manson, he wrote the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and he talks about when we spend our time chasing our dream, it is reinforcing the idea that we do not have our dreams yet. I spent a lot of those early years in my acting career feeling like I was chasing. I needed something more. I needed to book that lead role, that national commercial, that recurring role on a show. I needed these little benchmarks to feel like I was living my dream. But what I realized is even once I got those, I wanted more. Even when I got all of that, I'm like, but I need more. I need the next thing. I need the next thing. And so it helped me to realize that dichotomy shift was I am actually living my dream. Every time I get to act, I'm living my dream. Every time I read a script, I'm living my dream. Every time I write, every time I create, every time I get an audition, I get to live my dream as an actor. When I have the privilege to coach other actors, I remember one of them saying, I'm not sure how that landed with the audience. And I said, it's honestly none of your business what they think. Your business is not to wonder how they perceive your performance. Your business is to wonder how alive you felt in it. And I think that that's my journey is trying to figure out how to nurture that soul work, that creativity, how to nurture that individual human that's always existed fully within me, but has been suppressed and denied and tampered with through the various relationships. And now that I see this midlife unraveling happening to me, the shedding of the various roles, relationships, the loss that I've experienced and the number of years I've lived is actually this coming into my own of who I really am. At the end of our last episode, I was talking with our fabulous producer, Lindsay Guentzel, and she said, wow, you've lived a lot of lives. And it made me giggle. And I was like, yeah, I have. There have been a lot of shifts and twists and turns along the way. And it's honestly, I wouldn't change any of it. It's made me who I am. I've gotten to accumulate the most beautiful relationships along the way, the most profound friendships that could make me cry thinking about them. And it brings me back to another thing my coach, Ben Mathis, said is he one time gave me one of the biggest compliments that I think I could receive. And he said, you've lived a well-examined life. And it's going to make me cry, but like I think about the journey that I've been on and the amount of life that is accumulated so far. And then I think about how I get to express so much of that as an actor and as a filmmaker. I've never felt sad that I didn't start acting in my 20s. Of course, it would be fun to have a massive resume. But I think about the beauty that my lived life lends to the roles that I get to take. I think about the beauty of having lived in so many different places in the U.S., having experienced deep loss in my relationships, having experienced really radical transformations and belief and curiosity, and how all of that lends me to, or helps me lean into this deep empathy of knowing our human collective experience. Obviously, I have my own bias and privilege and lack of experience too, but one of the best journeys of acting is opening up our empathetic views. It's becoming characters that we might initially judge. It's digging deeper into full expressions of emotions that we might often deny. I say all the time that I don't chase, I attract, and I will not miss what's meant for me. And I think that that is the most soothing thing to my soul journey of wonder and to creativity, that I am on this path that I am meant to be on. And I love what I've gotten to do. I love what I'm currently doing, and I can't wait to explore even more deeply as I go. To learn more about Wake Up Maggie, visit wakeupmaggiemovie.com. This episode was brought to you by yours truly, Katie Prentiss. Produced and edited by the fabulous Lindsay Guentzel. Our incredible Sunshine Soul theme music was created by the one and only Adam Sweeney. For more resources and transcripts, visit katieprentiss.com. That's Katie, Katie, Prentiss, Prentiss.com.